let's talk right now about fiction. And we're going to go into our fiction section that we get to do in conjunction with not just the Liberty Conspiracy channel, but of course, the former Star Trek Writing Fellow channel. And we're going to talk short stories, and we're going to discuss a pretty cool guy. So let's go with The Outer Limits, my friends, and the control voice. Yeah.
There is nothing wrong with your television set. Do not attempt to adjust the picture. We are controlling transmission. If we wish to make it louder, we will bring up the volume. If we wish to make it softer, we will tune it to a whisper. We will control the horizontal. We will control the vertical. We can roll the image, make it flutter. We can change the focus to a soft blur, or sharpen it to crystal clarity. For the next hour, sit quietly and we will control all that you see and hear. We repeat, there is nothing wrong with your television set. You are about to participate in a great adventure. You are about to experience the awe and mystery which reaches from the inner mind to the outer limits.
Yeah, my old time at the Outer Limits, that was fun. And of course, it was always great to meet other writers, experience some of their amazing stories of working in the industry, either as prose fiction writers or script writers. And on the former Star Trek Writing Fellow channel, we're going to talk a lot more about television script writing and the process of what it was like at the Outer Limits and the Star Trek Voyager program where I was. And generally, what the pay was like and the whole process of being in the writer's room and things like that, working on the set, being down there and stuff. That was a lot of fun. And just the general industry as a person who might have worked on a staff on a TV show. But in addition to that, we're going to talk novelists and short story writers and things like that as well. And we'll talk great movies. And so tonight, I want to tell you about a man who is no longer with us and was a very, very nice guy. It was a friend of mine from England. Got to know Christopher Fowler because I would go over to the writers' conventions over in England, especially the British Fantasy Society conventions. They would have Fantasy Con every year. And Christopher was such a nice guy, and he was incredibly talented. Now, if you watch Liberty Conspiracy on Fridays, we do Fiction Friday. And so I read a story by Christopher a while back called Threads about these people who are vacationing in the Middle East. And the guy is a dealer in carpets, and he rips off somebody on a carpet deal. He discovers that there's a carpet that's really very valuable, and he gives them a lot less than it's actually worth. And then he breaks a tooth and goes to a dentist in this particular place, and he just derides the people from this particular Middle Eastern country. He says, they're regressive, they're not advanced like the Westerners and things like that. And they give him his comeuppance, that's for sure. This great story called Threads by Christopher Fowler. So I want to tell you about my friend Christopher Fowler and give you some memories of Christopher. And give you a quick overview. So first, let me show you. People might know the name Christopher Fowler most because of his series of Bryant and May novels. They were detectives who, over the course of decades, from World War II on, encountered a lot of very interesting mysteries. And the mysteries typically had supernatural overtones. And so this is the first one, Full Dark House. Great novel, wonderful mystery, very, very witty. And the characters of Bryant and May are fantastic. And what's really fun about Full Dark House is it happens in a theater. And Christopher was very well versed in theatrical productions. He also wrote a lot of advertising for an advertising firm. He lived in London. And just a terrific guy. I'll give you a quick overview of what Stephen Jones, my friend Stephen Jones, says in the opening to the story that we're going to read from Christopher Fowler in just a minute. But if you go to Fantastic Fiction, I want to give you a picture of Christopher and let you know what Christopher was like and what a nice guy he was. Now, Christopher is quite fascinating because not only was Christopher a great writer and a really nice guy, he also was a stand-in for Roger Moore as James Bond. So you can see he passed away in 2023. And as you can see here, Christopher Fowler was born in Greenwich, London. He was the multi-award winning author of many novels and short story collections and great short stories, and the author of the Bryant and May mysteries. His first bestseller was Roof World. Subsequent novels include Spanky, Disturbia, oh, that's a good one, Psychoville, and Calabash. He spent 25 years working in the film industry. His collection, Red Gloves, I have 2 copies of that actually, 25 New Stories of Unease, marked his first 25 years of writing. His memoir, Paperboy, won the Green Carnation Award and was followed by a second volume, Film Freak. Other novels include the dark comedy thriller Plastic, another good one, and the haunted house chiller Nyctophobia. Got that one too, good one. He wrote comedy and drama for BBC Radio, including Radio 1's first broadcast drama in 2005. He had a weekly column called Invisible Ink, and his website was fantastic. In The Independent on Sunday, his graphic novel for DC Comics was the critically acclaimed Mens Insana. His short story, The Master Builder, became a feature film entitled Through the Eyes of a Killer, starring Tippi Hedren and Marge Helgenberger. Among his awards were the Edge Hill Prize 2008 for Old Devil Moon and the Last Laugh Prize 2009 for The Victoria Vanishes. Christopher achieved several pathetic schoolboy fantasies, releasing a terrible Christmas pop single, becoming a male model, writing a stage show, posing as the villain in a Batman graphic novel, running a nightclub, appearing in the Pan Books of Horror, and standing in for James Bond. His short stories have appeared in Best British Mysteries, the Time Out Book of London Short Stories, The Best of Dark Terrors, London Noir, Neon Lit, Cinema Macabre, and the Mammoth Book of Horror, and many others. After living in the USA and France, he married and lived in London's King's Cross and in Barcelona. And I tell you, he was always so kind to me. He was a wonderful guy, always so interesting, very soft-spoken, highly intelligent, and just a great, great person. And so I hope I can recommend Christopher Fowler's writing to you, and that you'll discover some wonderful stories from Christopher Fowler. Now I'm going to turn to a book edited by another really good guy, Stephen Jones, probably the top British anthologist of horror in history. Stephen's a great guy. Stephen, if you're watching, I love you and I miss you. I hope I can see you soon. And Stephen is, by the way, Stephen is the guy when my novella Bite was released over at the World Fantasy Convention in 2014. The book wasn't there, and I had flown over for it. It was in Brighton. And I went out to dinner with F. Paul Wilson and Heather Graham and Tom Monteleone and Heather's husband, Dennis. And we were having some food down in Brighton, right by the seashore. And incredibly windy at that time, it was like it almost always is. But I went back in after the morning was an absolute bomb. Nothing worked, and the book wasn't there and everything. And I passed by Stephen's little office, and he had been organizing the convention. He said, "Oh, guard, come here. I said, "What, Steve? What's up?" He goes, "They found your book. They got it from the publisher." I'm like, "Oh, cool. Wow." He goes, "Hey, we know that you missed the opportunity to sell the book in the morning. You were going to have your debut." And I was like, yeah. He goes, "So, we're going to have the mass signing, which is when all the authors go and the attendees of the convention can get autographs on their books and stuff." And he goes, we're not allowing sales at the mass signing. He says, "But for you, we'd like to give you an exception if you want to sell your books there and sign them there." So I was like, wow, Stephen, that's so cool. So Stephen, thank you. I appreciate that very much. That was my first published, long form thing, my novella Bite. And the sequel to that is still to be released. It was accepted, but I didn't take the contract because they wanted me to separate my political name from my writer's name. Not Stephen. It was a separate publishing company. So, going to read to you from Best New Horror, edited by Stephen Jones. This is the mammoth book of Best New Horror, collecting a bunch of the Best New Horror books that Stephen had put out there, like 20 of them or something like that now. And I want to read to you a story by Christopher Fowler. So here we go. And then after this, we'll give you an update on where things stand in my story, Tower, that I've been working on. So there's so many great writers in here. Ramsey Campbell is in here. Ramsey's here. Christopher Fowler's here. Elizabeth Hand has a story in here. Pete Atkins, Gene Wolfe, Nicholas Royal. So many good people. David Scow. Kim Newman. Kim's a wild guy. He's really wild. David Morrell, the creator of Rambo. He's a nice guy. Richard Christian Matheson, great guy, of course, great guy. So now let's turn. Let's go to Christopher Fowler. Where is this one? If I can find it here. Oh, Mark is in here. Mark Morris. He's a great one. Here it is. This is The Luxury of Harm on page 107. So here we go. And I'll read you some of Stephen's intro too, because Stephen had known Christopher for many, many years. Of course, they were good friends. So he says, Christopher Fowler has written many award-winning novels and collections of short stories. His 2003 book, Full Dark House, there you go, won the British Fantasy August Derleth Award for Best Novel and was also a finalist for the Crime Writer Association's Dagger Award. The Water Room was shortlisted for the CWA's People's Choice Award in 2004, and so on and so forth. When he's not writing horror or dark comedy, he's creating new adventures for Brian and May, his elderly detectives of the sinister. He lives in King's Cross, London, with a very nice view of St. Paul's Cathedral. So he goes into his latest novel, which was White Corridor at that time, and that was another Brian and May mystery. Okay, so here it is. This is the story, The Luxury of Harm, on Fiction Friday. And welcome to it, and thank you for joining us on Liberty Conspiracy and later on our separate breakout for former Star Trek writing fellow. Thanks for being here. When I was 11, I was warned to stay away from a new classmate with freckles and an insolent tie. So naturally, we became inseparable partners in disruption, reducing our educators to tears of frustration. For the next 8 years, our friendship proved mystifying to all. Simon horrified our teachers by illegally racing his Easy Rider motorbike across the football field. We took the deputy headmaster's car to pieces, laying it out in the school car park as neatly as a stemmed Airfix kit. We produced a libelous school magazine with jokes filched from TV programs and created radio shows mocking everyone we knew. When you find yourself bullied, it's best to team up with someone frightening. Simon perverted me from learning, and I made his soul appear salvageable whenever he superglued the school cat or made prank phone calls. I fretted that we would get into trouble, and he worked out how we could burn down the school without being caught. Boys never tire of bad behavior. Through the principles of economics and the theory of gravity, the Wars of the Roses and Shakespeare's symbolism, we cut open golf balls and tied pupils up in the elastic, carved rocket ships into desks, and forged each other's parental signatures on sick notes. During puberty, Simon bought a mean leather jacket. I opted for an orange nylon polo neck shirt with Velcro fastenings. He looked like James Dean. I looked like Simon D. In order to meet girls, we signed up for the school opera. Simon met a blue-eyed blonde backstage, while I appeared as a dancing villager in a shrill, off-key production of The Bartered Bride. We double dated. I got the blonde's best friend, who had legs like a bentwood chair and a complexion like wood chip wallpaper. But her father owned a sweet shop, so we got free chocolate. I rang Simon's girlfriends for him because he was inarticulate and hung around his house so much that his mother thought I had been orphaned. Our friendship survived because he gave me visibility, confidence, and a filtered charisma that reached me like secondary smoking. He stopped me from believing there was no one else in the world who understood me. And there he remained in my mind and heart, comfortable and constant throughout the years, like Peter Pan's shadow, ready to be reattached if ever I needed it, long after his wasteful, tragic death. But before that end came, we shared a special moment. By the time this happened, we had gone our separate ways. He became the conformist with a country home and family, and I turned into the strange one, living alone in town. Recontacting Simon, I persuaded him to come to a horror convention with me in a tiny Somerset town called Silverton, where the narrow streets were steeped in mist that settled across the river estuary, and fishing boats lay on their sides in the mud like discarded toys. The place reeked of dead fish, tar, and rotting shells, and the locals were so taciturn it seemed that conversation had been bred out of them. The hotel, a modern brick block that looked like a caravan site outhouse, had no record of our booking at all and was full because of the convention. In search of a guest house, we found a bed and breakfast place down beside the river ramps and lugged bags up 3 flights through narrow corridors, watching by the landlady in case we scratched her Indian restaurant wallpaper. The beds felt wet and smelled of seaweed. By the time we returned to the convention hotel, the opening night party was in full swing. A yellow-furred alien was hovering uncertainly in the reception area, struggling to hold a pint mug in his rubber claws, and a pair of local goth girls clung to the counter, continually looking around as though they were afraid that their parents might wander in and spot them, raising their arms to point and scream like characters from Invasion of the Body Snatchers. Every year the convention had a theme, and this year it was murderers on page and screen. So there were a few Hannibal Lecters standing around, including a grinning lad with the top of his head sawn off. The bar staff took turns to stare at him through the serving latch. "Is this really what you do for fun?" Simon asked me, amazed that I could take pleasure from hanging out with guys dressed as Jason and Freddy, films no one even watched anymore. "Who comes to these things?" "Book people, lovely people," I said simply, gesturing at the filling room. "Give it a chance," I told him. "There's no attitude here, and it gets to be fun around midnight, when everyone's drunk. Come on, you said your life was very straight. This is something new." Simon looked unsure. He hardly ever read, so the dealers' rooms and panels and the literary conversation held no interest for him. He talked about his kids a lot, which was boring. I wanted him to be the kid I'd admired at school. He could relate to drinking, though, and relaxed after a couple of powerful local beers that swirled like dark sandstorms in their glasses. Simon could drink for England. "So," he asked, "are they all writers looking for tips here?" "In a way. Take this year's theme. We're intrigued by motivation, method, character development. How do you create a realistic murderer? Who would make a good victim?" I tried to think of a way of involving Simon in my world. Take the pair of us, for example. I'm on my home turf here. People know me. If I went missing, there would be questions asked. For once, you're the outsider. You were once the tough guy, the bike-riding loner nobody knew, and you're unknown here. That would make you the perfect victim. Simon wasn't the sort to let something beat him. His interest was piqued, and he wanted to understand why. Because taking you out would require an act of bravery and would be a show of strength. Killers seek notoriety to cover their inadequacies, but they also enjoy the remorse of loss. Simon snorted. How the hell does that work? There's a strange pleasure to be taken in melancholy matters, don't you think? A kind of tainted sweetness. Look at the Goths and their fascination with death and decay. Okay, that's the victim sorted. Well, who's the killer? Look around. Whom would you choose? Simon scoped out the bar area. Not the Jason or Freddy lookalikes. They're geeks who would pass out at the sight of a paper cut. They'd be happy to watch, but they wouldn't act. Good. Keep going. And the Goths couldn't kill, even though they're professional mourners. They look tough, but probably play gentle. Excellent. But him, over there. He tapped his forefinger against the palm of his hand, indicating behind him. He looks like he's here to buy books about guys who murder their mothers. It wouldn't be such a big step to committing a murder. Yeah, we get a few of those at conventions. They sit in the front row at the Q&As and are always the first to raise their hands with a question. There's one guy, a retired doctor, who even gives me the creeps. He's over there. I pointed out the cadaverous Mr. Henry with his greasy comb-over and skin like the pages of a book left in the sun. He never missed a convention, even though he wasn't a writer or publisher or even a reader. He once told me he owns one of the country's largest collections of car crash photographs and collects pictures of skin diseases. Oh, that's gross. I knew there would be freaks here. Relax. He's too obnoxious. If there's one trick to serial killer stories, it's making sure that the murderer is never someone you expect. Have you noticed there are some very cute girls hanging around the bar? You're right about that, Simon grudgingly admitted, watching two of them over the top of his glass. You should go and make their acquaintance, I suggested. I'll just be here talking weird books with old friends, or the other way around. I got into a long argument about the merits of Psycho 2 and 3, about Thomas M. Dish and William Hope Hodgson, and what makes a good story, and lost all track of time. I only checked my watch when the waiter started pulling shutters over the bar. Bidding farewell to my fellow conventioneers, I staggered off through the damp river air toward the guest house. Somehow, I managed to overshoot the path and ended up on the seaweed-slick ramp to the harbor. The only sounds were the lapping of the water and the tinging of masts. The tide was coming in, and the boats were being raised from their graves like reanimating corpses. Drunk and happy and suddenly tired, I sat down on the wet brown sand and allowed the sea mist to slowly reveal its secrets. It formed a visible circle around me, like the kind of fog in a video game that always stays the same distance no matter how hard you run. A discarded shovel someone had used to dig for lugworms stood propped against the harbor wall. Orange nylon fishing nets, covered with stinging algae, were strung out like sirens' shawls. And through the mist, I gradually discerned a slender figure, his head lolling slightly to one side, one arm lower than the other, like the skeleton in Aurora's Forgotten Prisoner model kit, or the one that features on my cover of the Seventh Pan book of horror stories. It was standing so still that it seemed to be more like the unearthed figurehead of a boat. than a man. There was a strong smell of ozone and rotting fish. The figure raised a ragged, dripping sleeve to its skull, rubbing skin to bone. It seemed as though it had ascended from the black bed of the sea. I fell off the effing dock and tore my jacket. I'm so incredibly slaughtered, said Simon, before tipping over and landing on his back in the sand with a thump. The next morning, screaming seagulls hovered so close to my bedroom window that I could see inside their mouths. Shafts of ocean sunlight bounced through the window, punching holes in my brain. My tongue tasted of old duvet. I needed air. I knocked on Simon's door, but there was no answer. Breakfast had finished, and the landlady had gone. The Easy Rider motorbike still stood in the car park behind the guest house. The tide was out, and the mist had blown away, leaving the foreshore covered in silvery razor clams and arabesques of green weed. On the stone walkway above the harbor, an elderly lady in a tea-cozy hat marched past with a shopping bag in her hands. There was no one else about, and the gulls shrieked and wheeled. Carefully, I walked across the beach to the spot where Simon had fallen and knelt down. It took a moment to locate the exact place. Rubbing gently at a patch of soft sand, I revealed his sand-filled mouth, his blocked nostrils, one open shell-scratched eye that stared bloodily up into the sky. I rose and stood hard on his face, rocking back and forth until I had forced his head deeper into the beach. I carefully covered him over with more sand, smoothing it flat and adding some curlicues of seaweed and a couple shells for effect. Finally, I threw the shovel I had used on his neck as far as I could into the stagnant water of the harbor. As I headed back to the convention hotel, ready to deliver my lecture on random death, the luxury of harm, a heartbreaking happiness descended upon me. I knew that there would be plenty of time to savor the full, delicious loss of my friend in the days, the months, the years to come. Now, Christopher never invited me out to the seaside, and I'm glad he never did that. And he never showed me a shovel. But Christopher Fowler was a wonderful, wonderful man, and he had a great sense of humor, and he could turn that humor into dark areas and make it very macabre. And so that story from Christopher Fowler is from the Best New Horror, the Mammoth Book of Best New Horror. It was published in 2007, edited by Stephen Jones. It's the story called The Luxury of Harm. Christopher Fowler. Rest in peace, Christopher. Good guy. And again, if you want to get a good series of mysteries, the Brian and May mysteries, great stuff from Christopher. Now, let's head on over into the fiction I've been working on called Tower. Hopefully this would be something that Christopher would like. If you're just joining the show, I'll give you a quick recap. It's about a man and a woman. It's told from the woman's perspective in 1960. She and he work for the Forestry Service of Vermont. Her name is Caroline. His name is Paul. And they are going out in mid-November, late November, to close up a fire tower that used to be on a hill in a town called Frenton, Vermont. It's in the midst of a bunch of forest land with a big fence all around the forest land, miles and miles and miles away from the nearest town, like, hour drive. And it's in the middle of nowhere. It was a tiny little town that got taken over by the government, and it was taken by eminent domain. The people were moved out of it years before, and it's been flooded to make a reservoir. So now the hill that had the fire tower on it is now an island, and it's in the middle of this big, big lake. In order to get there, you got to go through a chain link fence at the exterior of the forest. They check the fence, looks like everything's safe. They're going in to close up this fire tower, make sure it's all safe and secure. When they get there, they discover they have to take a canoe across. They leave their Jeep. They take the canoe across. They discover that it has been broken into. Somebody scrawled a bunch of weird writing near one of the windows. One of the windows is broken slightly, and there's no trees on this island. It's just scrub and rock. And then a big snow squall comes up while they're there, and they're checking the perimeter, and somebody has tied little black ribbons around the barbed wire that goes around this island thing. And the canoe is blown way offshore. So they realize, Paul's like, well, we got to get this canoe back. So he swims out to try to get it. He can't get it up from the water. There's something that's connected from the string and the tip of the canoe, and Tyler too. And he can't get it, and he starts experiencing hypothermia. So Caroline swims out to rescue him. He had taken off most of his clothes and stuff like that. She brings him in. She brings him upstairs during the night, and then sleeps next to him, sort of cocooned in their clothing. They wake up the next morning. There's snow on the ground. It's gotten very cold. And so now they have to figure out how they're going to get off the island. How long are they going to be there? It's the weekend. And she mentions to him, when I got the Jeep, I didn't sign the Jeep out. He goes, well, eventually they'll find out that the Jeep is gone. They'll know that we're here. And then they look at the schedule inside the tower, and the last thing on the schedule is that this visit wasn't on the schedule. It was taken off the schedule. It wasn't on there. So people literally don't know that they're there. So he has a little bit of food left in his backpack, and they're trying to figure out what to do. They go around, they collect some of the scrubby stuff from the bushes and stuff like that, and they're going to be able to build a fire. And they sort of, out of the filing cabinets in this sort of very Spartan office, just basically metal tables, a couple filing cabinets and stuff. But they're able to make like a little flue, like a chimney sort of a thing. And they're going to use the hole in the glass to get some of the smoke out. And that's sort of where we pick up from there, as they decide. He thought, well, maybe we could tie all this bundle of twigs and stuff up, and I could like float across. She's like, nah. He goes, we're at least going to have a few days here. We might get kind of hungry. We've got the nuts and stuff like that I have in my backpack, and some candy bars and stuff. So that's sort of where we stand on the story. So I'll go back a little bit in Tower. And again, I want to thank Birdhouse for doing the amazing artwork for that. And heck, it's almost as scary as that image. But anyway, so we're going to go with the story. And here is Tower as far as we stand right now. So we'll go back a little bit. And here it is. Caroline set to starting the fire while Paul opened his magic backpack and took out some canned nuts. Welcome to the island kingdom of Frenton, Mr. Peanut, he offered, holding aloft the tin as if it were a torch and he were the Statue of Liberty. Then, still holding the pose, he offered her a sly grin. It's almost a full can, by the way. Then he knelt beside her as she used one more of her precious matches from her own backpack to light the driest of the tinder they had collected and had mixed with papers from the cabinet into a kind of bird's nest spiderweb cluster on the floor. Thanks. Sinfully dirty but dreadfully hungry, she devoted barely an eye blink of time to wiping her fingers on her jeans before grabbing a handful. And as the tinder sparked and the smaller twigs steamed, then caught in quick flashes of gold and yellow, she threw half into her mouth and savored the explosion of salt and oils. Thank God. He seemed to relax as well, settling down to remove his shoes and tug at his socks. Now these are wet. I took them off before my little swim in Loch Ness here, but damn, I feel like I'm going to be wet all the time. He yanked off one, then the other, and turned to study the small fireplace arrangement they had constructed. The smoke rose, some rolling upwards into the room as it got past their little hood arrangement, but much of it was being drawn out through the breach in the glass. Not bad. He got on his knees and shifted the files, focusing on pulling them further towards him. Then he tried to reach for his socks, as if he were going to hang them over the fire to dry. Are there any paper clips around? Caroline nodded, got up, and plodded to the central table. I wonder what the town was like, she mused, smelling the smoke and thinking about the old chimneys sticking up down below, all the families around the hearth, and the cooking and kitchens. Paul hummed in acknowledgement, but seemed absorbed by the challenging geometry of their makeshift hearth. When she returned from the table with paper clips, he thanked her, nodded, stuffed 3 between his teeth, and proceeded to clasp together the oversized house of cards with the hangers on both open drawers to create a manila bonnet that did the job they needed. As the little fire burned, she fed more twigs and paper, watching the dampest of the fuel sizzle and emit hissing snakes of steam rather than smoke, and she appreciated the dry material they could sacrifice to keep the project fed. A little touch of home, perhaps, Paul noted, unzipping his jacket and reaching for the buttons on his olive Vermont Forest Service shirt. Reminds me of being a kid and coming in from an afternoon with friends, sledding on what we used to call Dead Man's Hill. He scoped around the floor for his wet undershirt, which had been left in a pile of neglect the night previous when Caroline had brought him in. Then he brought them both near the small hearth and began clipping their collars to the file drawers. Without his shirt, and in the light of day, his skin was even more starkly pale than Caroline had noticed the night before. He appeared to be in better physical condition than she remembered, and she noticed something else. You're cut. She pointed at his right hip, where she could see a purplish line running horizontally for about 3 inches. It appeared to have healed, but the sight got her attention nonetheless. What? She nodded, drew his eyes with hers. There. Oh, he sighed and pulled back his head in a nonchalant fashion. That's old. Oh. He rested his right hand near it and continued to peer at it. Not a good memory. Did you get hurt in Korea? Yeah. She nodded, leaving the silence to conclude. But as Paul picked up and slid on his coat, he continued. I deserved it. He yanked up the zipper. It's a reminder of something that only the 4 guys in my fire team know about. Well, what's a fire team? It's usually a few men, the building block of a specialized squad, which itself is the subcomponent of a unit. We were called the Seekers, not necessarily good at fighting, but good at tracking and observing enemy lines and trails. We got a friendly wave from back home in '52, Truman's orders, for Operation Broken Reed, which they set up to gather critical intelligence on the PRC's covert activities. The mission involved a small team of U.S. operatives led by a 5th, a CIA officer who was inserted into North Korea to collect information on Chinese troop movements and supply lines. He paused. It didn't exactly work that way, though. She watched him pick up the can of nuts, nod at it, and offer them to her again without taking any at all. I suppose I shouldn't tell you any of this, or I should make something up, something heroic. But we weren't heroic. We shouldn't have even been there. And I've come to understand that if anyone says we had a right to self-defense, they're wrong. Not only were we there as invaders ourselves, each one of us was the recipient of stolen goods. Every one of us. The guns and ammo, the clothes on our backs, the food we ate, all of it came from not from our own sweat and toil, but from taxpayers back home who had money taken from them. Now I realize that no one has a right to claim self-defense with a weapon he got through coercive means. But we were there all right, doing what we thought was a great and noble deed for freedom, using weapons bought off the backs of other Americans, whether they liked it or not, swimming in from subs through the torpedo tubes, hiking in from the coast, going gangbusters there for reasons the politicians and parrots claimed were to protect Americans from giant invisible dominoes, a giant lie. And, deeper, forcing a person to pay for so-called protection is nothing more than a protection racket. Now I realize it. Now I can't unsee the truth. Not as long as I live. So yeah, they opened the tubes, and I used to be a good swimmer, and we went in and met our CIA leader, and then we started off into the darkness using compass bearings and the silvery light of a moon, and the silvery light of a sliver of moon. It was summer then, so fairly warm. And mind you, I'd never been there before. A couple of the other fellows had run through the route, so they were old hands, but I was new. And that CIA man, well, none of us had dealt with him. I should have known he was trouble from the first. Caroline sat beside him and felt the warmth of the small fire, smelled the smoke, heard the pop and sizzle, and ate a few more of the salty nuts. Did he send you into a hot zone? No. He was a madman, a brutality expert. First thing he did that shook me to the core was to lure a dog from the back of a little house. It was all dark, and the dwelling might be comparable to someone's garden shed here, but it was a home with a clothesline and a little fencing for a collie. We spotted the dog early because there was a small 40-watt bulb burning near the bamboo gate of the yard, and our hike was pretty far from things, so the animal didn't even make a noise when it saw us. No barking, just kind of an inquisitive wagging of the tail. Then it sat near the light and watched us. But this guy... Paul drew up one cheek and shook his head in a motion of great misgiving and disbelief. He pulls out some of his provisions, some beef jerky of some kind, and starts tearing off bits and tossing them over the fence to the animal to get it to move closer. And it does. He seemed to relive it, moving his arm in an upward swinging motion, as if acting it out. And the dog comes closer. With each toss, he gets it to move closer, thinking it's got a friend. And then Paul shook his head. Damn. For a moment, a fleeting couple of breaths, the atmosphere of that place seemed to surround them. She could hear the buzz of the insects and feel the humid air, see the bright, wondering eyes of the little animal as it approached its new friends, curious, tempted by the food. I don't know why I didn't stop him. Did he kill the dog? He nodded, stabbed him in the neck. And when one of the guys asked him what the hell he was doing, he said it was to keep things secure and silent. But the dog was fine, and that opened the door to the worst part. Caroline watched him, feeling her eyebrows knit. And Paul said, "The little boy." So, that's the story so far. That's Tower. As things get a little more complicated and personal for Paul and Caroline. Appreciate you listening. I hope that was fun for y'all. And if you're watching on former Star Trek writing fellow, thank you for being here. We often will do stories. Sometimes there'll be separate stories on their own. It'll be a little cleaner, not the live reads where I flub sometimes. We'll polish those up and so on. But I hope you like that. I hope it's fun. You can listen in your car or whatever. And I hope it gave you some great information as we talked about Christopher Fowler. On Wednesday next week, we'll do a Wordsmith Wednesday. Talk about another great book, another great writer, maybe a screenwriter. Who knows what it'll be. And that'll be Wednesday live on the show here, Liberty Conspiracy. And then pre-recorded or recorded, I'll put it out. The Russian team and I, for the Russian propaganda, will put it out on the former Star Trek Writing Fellow channel on YouTube and on Rumble. And Taylor Saunders says inside Rumble, interesting guard, the plot is building. Thanks, Taylor. Yeah, it's going to get, like I said, the ending, it's going to be intense. The ending's going to be very, very intense. We have Vicky B. comment about earlier in the show. That lends to the we get the government we deserve. If the people in New Jersey are corrupt, then why should they complain about the government or what the government is? Equal weights and measures in all things. Yeah, well, the problem is, unfortunately, the tragedy of the commons. So not everybody is tied into the government. So it's not the government that the people want necessarily. It's the government that a portion of the people want, supported by a lot of money and a lot of different interests and things like that, and a lot of politicians who will pull things in. So, it's so confused and messed up, I hear the co-pilot. Oh, she's further away. I think. Hey, thanks for watching, everybody. I'll leave you with some good stuff. We're going to actually close off tonight. I'll show you my screen. This is my background screen, of course, my Doctor Who thing from the best era of Doctor Who, the Philip Hinchcliffe era. Actually, they started the Diamond Vortex with John Pertwee when Barry Letts was the producer. But that is the best. And man, what a theme. What a theme. We'll talk TV themes too, by the way. The best TV themes. There's so many. We'll talk that for former Star Trek writing fellow as well. Talk Jerry Goldsmith, Planet of the Apes, all that stuff, the music for that. And I will leave you with our outro for Liberty Conspiracy tonight. And if you're watching on former Star Trek writing fellow, this is one of the outros that we do, and hopefully you'll dig it. And come watch us on Liberty Conspiracy. And if you want to support anything, any of the shows, just go to the Gardner Goldsmith Substack. You can become a subscriber over there for a few bucks a month. That is always very beneficial. And I appreciate anybody who contributes while we're going live on Rumble. That's a really big deal. Inside the audios, you can also, when the audios are posted at the Substack later on, inside the audio post for each show for Liberty Conspiracy, you'll see the PayPal link. So you can go there. So, I tried to sort of figure out what the budget should be. For what I hope to get for contributions and stuff like that. That would be really cool. And also, I'm not going to mention it right now. I'm still trying to figure it out. Sachi writes, enjoyed that guard. Hey, thank you. Oh, I like that image. Oh, here's the co-pilot. Hey, co-pilot. She's here. Appreciate that. Hey, buddy. How you doing? So I'll leave you with our outro. We have a couple outros for Liberty Conspiracy. Hi. Hey. And I will welcome everybody's comments at Guard Goldsmith. And I hope you have a terrific night. God bless you all. God bless Christopher Fowler. You never know the good people you're going to meet when you just travel just outside your house or whatever. And now through the internet, we get to meet each other in so many of these ways. So thanks, everybody. We're going to go with outro number 2. It's got some horror stuff in it. God bless. See you later.
Somehow I already knew what I was going to find. The chapter about Harker and Dracula's library was there, intact. I wanted to sit down and read it right then, but had to content myself with riffling through the pages just to prove that I was not hallucinating. I felt sure no one here would know or care, but I wondered if it had been printed that way, or if the priest had marked it himself. Whatever. Back at home, the literary world would sit up and take notice. When they saw what I had, my name would live on, forever linked to Bram Stoker's Dracula.